Well, it's a rule that they put in several years ago, because they've general managers felt that there were players that were intentionally doing it. And it's tough when it's not, and I think it's something that's been talked about publicly and probably privately too, whether that is a situation that should be so hard. I mean, you look at it the other night, if you just a player like Kopitar is going to do that 1,000 times in 999. He knows where it's going all the time, right? So it's a tough play. And then conversely, earlier in the series too, it's both guys that aren't intentionally doing it. But that's, you know what, that's the rule, and that's what they. It's interesting because they put that rule in, and then they standardize glass.
Fair, and I'm not saying it affects this game or your team or their team, but it would be fair if it were icing or something else.
I really haven't looked at it like this. I never really was a big fan of the rule, and quite honest, because ice conditions in a lot of buildings. Puck is not always flat on the ice, and that's not the player's fault.
Coach, I mean, is there any concern about tension? I mean, do you say anything to get your guys loose
No.
before Game 7?
No, I don't think we have to talk about tension or any of that stuff.
This team played with such a big lead in every series, and last year's playoffs, you never came close to facing elimination. Does that matter in a situation like this, or have the guys done it enough in their careers?
Yeah, I don't think it matters at all, to be quite honest. I think that both teams have enough veteran players that have played in deciding games. Game 7s are not that big a deal when you look at it. It's winning the fourth game. It's a lot bigger, and that's what's way more important. Game 7 is, for quite honest, for outside the locker room to make a big deal out of it. It's not that important.
That said, are there any memorable Game 7s that you played in or coached in that you remember?
I think when I was in Calgary, I think Anaheim beat us in Game 7. I think we beat St. Louis one year in Game 7 when I was in San Jose, maybe. Is that right, Dan? Was it Game 7?
Game 7.
They don't really stick out in my mind, quite honest, because they're not. Because that's how you see it. They're not. You either win in Game 4, or you lose. You win 4 games, you lose 4 games. That's what sticks out in my mind, not Game 7s. Quite honestly, I remember 3-game series and 5-game series. When there was 2 out of 3s and when there was 3 out of 5s.
I know earlier in the series you said you needed a bit more from your top guys with what Dustin was able to do in the last game and Anji the game before that. Do you feel you're starting to get that now?
You mean top offensive guys?
Yeah, top
I
offensive.
think we need more from our left side, period. We've got we've got 2 even strength goals of the whole playoffs from our left side. So you're putting a lot of. That's 2 out of 3. You know, when you're talking about lines, that's 1 out of 3 guys that aren't pulling their weight.
Darryl, the first goal, team scoring first, 6-0. I mean, in
Yeah.
Game 2, maybe a bit of a misnomer, but still,
Yeah.
it seems to set the tone for both teams for some reason.
Well, it's the league is, and more so about when somebody comes from behind, you go, holy, everybody talks about it, right? But it is, especially this season when there's so many games jammed in, and it didn't start once playoffs started. It started when the season kicked off. Chasing the lead or not having that energy for offense has been tough for everybody. And I think this series even defines it even more just because of the closeness of the teams. Hey, look at it. There's our conference 4 teams going to Game 7s. Tells you how good the conference is. It tells you how close the teams are. That's not, that's clear. There's not a top bottom. And it's probably the way it should be when you look at it.
How much of that do you think is a function of the cap and what the league wanted when that came in a few years ago?
I think everybody tries to keep pace within the cap, and our conference is like that. I think that their teams are really, really close.
You had some heavy minute guys the last game, so did they. What is it about a player that allows them to do that? And when you're deciding which guys you can play heavy minutes, what goes into your thoughts about that?
I think a lot you try and get a read on you guys early in the game, and then you try and get a read because primarily top guys are playing against top guys, not so much in any sort of a checking role, even though there hasn't been a lot of goals scored, but it's not in a checking role. It's a pretty much heads up, head on roll, and those guys are high minute guys, and usually when they're on, they carry the momentum of their team, or the weight of their team, or the shift to shift consistency of their team, and I think both teams have players that can do that for sure.
But you said you try to get a read on early. What do you mean by that? Just the way they're skating, the way they're looking?
Yeah, I mean, some guys are banged up. Some guys can't play as much. Some guys can play through it. Some guys, it's just situation things. I mean, you can tell, your players well enough, you can tell when they're really sharp or if somebody's not quite on, and you can kind of work your way through it.
Darryl, in Drew's case then, has it just been a matter of also improved conditioning that's allowed him to play those minutes?
Drew's played a lot of minutes this year, and so he played a lot of minutes last year in the playoffs too. But again, that gets blown with Drew. That is a factor going forward. He's still one of the youngest players on the ice. Quite honestly, he's going to become a better player as he gains more experience. Quite honestly, he hasn't had a lot of this experience. So, but what you also have to look at, not necessarily with Drew, but playoff games are on average right now 2 minutes longer than regular season games when you do it. So the reason that they are 2 minutes longer, because your top players are probably playing that much more during the game. So if he is a 24-minute guy during the regular season or 25-minute guy, if you do it, there's probably 11 or 12 defensemen that are 25 to 32. Well, those guys, that's where they fall in the regular season too, in that order. But your games are 2 to 3 minutes longer, so it's natural that the longer you play, that those guys are going to play a little more.
Coach, what's the deciding factor whether Toffoli gets into the lineup tonight?
I haven't thought about it.
They played Thornton 22 minutes last game, and
Yeah.
what's the debate there on the bench? You can't get caught in trying to match that, or do you try that?
Actually, they were trying to match Joe against Mike.
Right.
So,
The last game.
so quite honest with face-offs, we didn't have Mike out there that much. So Joe was coming on the fly more than anything else, or when it was later in the game and those guys were just playing. If you look at it early, it wasn't that matchup or those minutes that affected it. Yeah, and quite honest, there's 5. He plays primarily the whole power play, so that's going to affect that too. And there's 5, counting the 5 and 3. I'm not sure what the minutes ended up being, but I'm going to bet that of those, probably was there 8 minutes total, even though it shows 1 of 5, probably 8 minutes. I'm going to bet he's in that 6 to 7, so it probably moved him up 2 to 3 minutes too.